I'm going to prove to you in roughly a minute that Albert Pike, the Confederate General and 33-degree Mason, was a liar. So I'm going to start with a paper entitled Albert Pike, Hero, Scoundrel, or Just Misunderstood by Michael Poyen from April 30, 2011. In August 1825, he, meaning Albert Pike, passed his entrance exams and was accepted at Harvard University, though when the college requested payment of tuition fees for the first 2 years, he chose not to attend. Now we have a letter dated March 17, 1890, from Albert Pike to William Hopkins Tillinghast, the assistant librarian of Harvard College Library. Apparently, he'd been sent a number of questions. Pike writes, I am not a graduate of Harvard. I passed examinations successfully for the purpose of entering in 1825, presented myself a year afterward for the purpose of entering the junior class, having completed the freshman and sophomore studies during the year at home, declined to pay the 2 years tuition required of me, and I never was a student for even a day at the university. Now we have an undated letter which is probably written around 1842. And this was to Rufus Griswold, and it was for biographical information for a sketch in the Poets and Poetry of America. So Pike writes to Rufus Griswold, from the age of 4 to 16, I was at school, partly in the public schools at Newburyport and a private school there, and at last at Framingham. About that time, I entered, passing a fair examination at Harvard. I do not now recollect in what year. Well, this is nonsense, because if you have passed the entrance exam to Harvard at age 15, which he would have been, you would remember the year very clearly. And he remembered it in 1890. In 1842, he's in his early 30s. So he's fudging here. He's lying to Rufus Griswold. If he didn't know the year, and he was sending in biographical information for the biographical sketch in this important book, he would have looked it up, you know. So when he says he can't remember the year, that's so Rufus Griswold won't check up on it, because he didn't actually pass the exam at all. That means that when Pike established the schools that he established, he had no credentials. He lied about his credentials and said he'd passed the exam at Harvard, and he actually had not passed it. So the whole thing was a scam. Now, the reason this is important in my research is that I have found plenty of evidence that the poetry that Albert Pike claimed, which he published in the early 1830s, was signed A.P. That was not his. He stole it from Abby Poyen, who was a 14-year-old child prodigy in one of his classes in Newburyport. This is Matthew Franklin Whittier's future wife, Abby Poyen Whittier. So all of this poetry is very deeply mystical, brilliant poetry, and it's all very feminine. And Albert Pike was an oaf. You know, he was a huge hulking guy that loved to party, flirt with the girls, and hunt. Okay, he was a big hunter. So this poetry is obviously not his, but here we've caught him in an obvious lie.